Welcome to the debate. Imagine a single piece of paper that is so incredibly valuable that a highly orchestrated network of, educators, official translators, and black market syndicates will risk federal prison just to sell it.
For over 1 million rupees a copy, usually.
Right, a massive amount of money. And today, we aren't discussing stolen state secrets or corporate espionage. We are examining the 2026 NEET UG crisis.
Which is just a staggering situation. I mean, the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test is the single centralized gateway to medical school in India.
Exactly. And recently, it suffered a massive security breach. It actually led to the cancellation of the May 3rd exam for over 2.27 million aspiring doctors.
Yeah, and it sparked nationwide protests, federal investigations, and, really intense legal scrutiny.
So the central intellectual question we really have to grapple with today is one of structural viability. Like, can the national testing agencies, the NTAs, new technological reforms actually secure this centralized system?
Right. Or does the sheer scale of the corruption prove that a single exam model is just inherently untenable and has to be completely decentralized?
I argue that robust technological architecture, specifically the impending transition to computer-based testing, can actually successfully salvage and secure a unified national meritocracy.
And my position is that the centralized nature of the exam makes it intrinsically vulnerable to systemic insider corruption. I mean, it validates the growing demands to just abolish the single exam model entirely in favor of decentralized, state-level admissions.
Well, let me outline exactly why the structural integrity of a national standard is something we absolutely must save. The NTA was designed to create a level playing field, right? Ensuring a student from a rural village is measured by the exact same rigorous metric as a student from a wealthy metropolis.
But that playing field isn't actually level in practice.
Well, the operational vulnerabilities exposed in the 2026 pen and paper test are serious, I concede that. But they are localized supply chain issues, not permanent structural flaws.
I don't know if I can agree with localized.
Let me finish this thought. If we analyze the NTA's recent Supreme Court affidavit, they outline a really aggressive, multi-layered data defense strategy. They're implementing real-time biometric authentication tied directly to AUDR. They're deploying AI to analyze feeds from over 185,000 CCTV cameras to detect, microanomalies during testing. But most critically, the mandate to transition to computer-based testing, or CBT, by 2027 completely changes the physics of the exam.
It's just a software patch, though.
No, it isn't just a software patch. These data-driven structural layers will definitively eliminate the physical breaches in the command chain that actually caused the current crisis.
The 2026 crisis proves conclusively that technology cannot engineer away systemic human rot. I mean, we really have to look closely at the actual mechanics of this failure.
Okay.
This was not a sophisticated cyber attack from external hackers. It was an inside job orchestrated by the very subject experts and translators appointed by the NTA itself.
Right. There was institutional failure.
Exactly. Individuals like the Pune headmistress Manisha Havaldar and Professor P.V. Kulkarni. They manually leaked these materials to coaching centers in massive prep industry hubs like Sikar and Latur.
Yes.
And by forcing 2.27 million students to rely on a single high-stakes 3-hour test, the state has commercialized education to just an unprecedented degree. We've built a system that heavily favors wealthy families who can either afford elite localized coaching or literally buy leaked papers on the black market.
Right, but
that dynamic destroys true meritocracy. It is exactly why the centralized system itself must be dismantled, not just given some digital upgrade.
But you are characterizing this as an unfixable human problem, and I think that ignores the very architecture of the new digital systems. Let's examine the specific mechanisms of security here and how moving to CVT fundamentally alters the landscape.
The landscape might change, but the people running it don't.
Hear me out. In the traditional pen and paper test, you have this immense physical logistics chain. You have to print millions of highly sensitive documents at private printing presses, right? Then you load them onto transport trucks. drive them across massive geographic regions, and store them in local bank strong rooms.
Yeah, the logistical overhead is huge.
It is, and every physical hands-off is a potential vulnerability. It's basically the logistical equivalent of moving billions of dollars in physical cash across the country and on armored trucks.
Okay, sure.
But by moving to computer-based testing in 2027, which was recommended by the High Power Committee, you eliminate the printing press, you eliminate the transport trucks, and you eliminate the physical storage at local centers. You digitize the vault, completely removing that physical surface area for corruption.
Removing the physical cash doesn't matter at all if the bank manager is selling the vault combination before the money is even deposited.
I don't think that's an accurate analogy.
It absolutely is. The physical loopholes you're talking about are a distraction from the human element at the very top of the chain. Let's look at the findings from the CBI, India's premier federal investigative agency, regarding Manisha Havaldar.
Right. She was a subject expert.
Exactly. Appointed by the NTA to review the paper. She didn't need to defeat a metal detector or intercept a transport truck. The CBI explicitly found that she simply memorized the physics questions.
Yes, that was a major breach.
She recalled them from memory, wrote them down later, used a standard school computer to print the material, and just passed it to a physics teacher associated with a medical academy. And P.V. Kulkarni had access because he was an official translator.
Right, but
When the architects of your security system are the ones selling the blueprints, adding AI cameras at the printing press is pure security theater.
look, the economic incentive for corruption exists in any high-stakes scenario, but digitizing the vault fundamentally alters the timeline and the access vectors.
How so? If they have the questions, they have the questions.
Because a fully realized computer-based test doesn't just mean reading a static PDF on a screen. The ultimate goal of this architecture is dynamic question generation.
Okay, but
When you have a massive, encrypted, central server, you can dynamically pool and randomize questions from a bank of tens of thousands of calibrated items, literally seconds before the exam begins.
right.
So if a rogue translator memorizes 50 questions, but the system dynamically generates unique tests from a vast, secure repository, the leaked subset becomes statistically useless to a black market buyer. You engineer the value out of the leak.
But that assumes a perfectly isolated digital environment and completely incorruptible question setters feeding that vast repository.
It relies on statistical dilution, not perfect human behavior.
But we are talking about a highly sophisticated market of corruption that emerged specifically because the centralized asset is so incredibly valuable. The CBI investigation revealed financial transactions ranging from 200,000 to over $1 million rupees per student.
I'm not denying the black market exists.
But a single point of entry for the entire nation's medical future means that localized syndicates have millions of reasons to find the one human vulnerability in your digital fortress. And this brings us to a massive issue of legal precedent and institutional trust.
Well, judicial oversight is exactly what ensures the NTA remains accountable during this transition.
Judicial patience isn't a substitute for systemic overhaul, though. Look at the Supreme Court's ruling in the Vanshika Yadav case from 2024.
Right.
The court explicitly refused to cancel the NEET exam despite widespread paper leak allegations at the time. Their reasoning was that the leaks weren't systemic in magnitude.
Which was true based on the evidence at the time.
But the entire legal bargain struck in that ruling relied on the K. Radhakrishnan Committee's 101 recommendations to secure the future of the exam. The court essentially trusted the executive body to fix its own house.
And they are fixing it.
Yet a mere 21 months later, we have the catastrophic 2026 leak. We saw a guest paper circulating in Psychar that matched up to 140 questions on the real exam.
Yes, it was a severe operational failure.
We have chemistry teachers like Shashikant Suthar blowing the whistle on massive overlaps. When the operative premise of a Supreme Court refusal is empirically falsified in less than 2 years, how can you justify maintaining this centralized body's authority?
I justify it by recognizing the scale of the institutional reform underway. Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan openly admitted to the breach in the command chain. There is no institutional denial here.
Admitting it doesn't solve it.
But implementing 101 systemic recommendations across an infrastructure that tests over 2 million students is a massive, ongoing 18-month engineering process.
18 months is a lifetime for these students.
Yes, but moving from scanning optical mark recognition bubbles to fully encrypted computer-based tests requires securing thousands of individual testing centers. It requires establishing robust broadband networks and installing mobile jammers with the help of Barrett Electronics Limited to sever external communication.
But you're basically...
You are demanding a finished, impenetrable product while the foundation is still being poured. Is it intellectually rigorous to label this a permanent systemic failure before the mandated CBT migration in 2027 has even been launched?
It is absolutely necessary to label it a systemic failure when the construction of your system routinely crushes the people it was built to serve.
I think crushes is strong language.
You describe this transition period as a sterile, bureaucratic exercise, but it is playing out in the lives of millions of young people. You ask for patience until 2027, but the 2026 failure means over 2 million students had to reset one of the most grueling exams in the world on June 21st.
It's unfortunate, I agree.
We cannot ignore the human toll. We are looking at 17 reported student suicides directly linked to this crisis. These are young people who dedicated years of their lives to this single metric only to face the profound psychological trauma of an invalidated effort. This isn't just about administrative timelines, it is about a broken social contract that actively costs lives.
The human toll is undeniably tragic, and the immense pressure of medical admissions in India is a profound societal issue that we really must confront. But we have to ask ourselves analytically if that pressure comes strictly from the existence of a centralized test or from the sheer mathematical reality of the system.
The centralized test concentrates the pressure.
But look at the numbers. We have 2.27 million applicants competing for roughly 100,000 available medical seats. That is an acceptance rate of under 5%. Even if you completely decentralize the system tomorrow, the competition for those finite seats remains incredibly fierce. The bottleneck is supply, not just the testing methodology.
The competition remains, sure, but the single point of failure model amplifies that pressure to an absolute breaking point. It funnels all that mathematical anxiety into a single 3-hour window.
Standardized testing always does that.
This is precisely why we're seeing unprecedented social mobilization, though. Look at the formation of the Cockroach Janta Party, founded by Abhijit Dipki.
Right, the CJP.
Young people feel the centralized state views them as disposable pests, and they are reclaiming that term to demand accountability. This frustration with centralized arrogance bleeds into broader democratic issues.
Well,
it is exactly why a prominent climate activist like Sonam Wangchuk undertook a dangerous 21-day hunger strike at Jantar Mantar, directly linking this educational crisis to his demands for democratic autonomy.
Wangchuk's leap from protesting for Ladakh's regional autonomy under the Sixth Schedule to leading a protest against the national medical exam is fascinating, I'll give you that. But it reveals how this crisis is being leveraged for broader political aims.
It's not just political leverage, it's a systemic critique.
But tying environmental policy and regional statehood to standardized testing conflates entirely different mechanisms of governance. How does returning to fragmented state-level control solve the core issue of ensuring medical competency?
It solves it through local accountability and restoring democratic agency. Wangchuk recognizes that centralized bureaucratic overreach, whether it's ignoring the ecological fragility of the Himalayas from an office in New Delhi or enforcing a flawed testing system on 2 million students, stems from the exact same systemic arrogance.
I think that's a stretch.
He lost nearly 9.5 kilograms during that strike. He was forcibly removed to Safdarjung Hospital by the Delhi police. His wife, Gitanjali Angmo, had to legally battle just to prevent unconsented medical treatment.
His commitment is unquestionable, yes.
But this level of extreme protest highlights how deeply disenfranchised citizens feel by a centralized state that just refuses to listen. This is why prominent regional leaders like Tamil Nadu's former Chief Minister M.K. Stalin and current leaders like Vijay are demanding we scrap NEET entirely and revert to admissions based on local 12th grade board marks.
Well, let's critically examine that alternative, because reverting to fragmented state boards introduces catastrophic inconsistencies.
How so?
the entire genesis of the NEET exam, which replaced the old All-India pre-medical test and dozens of disjointed state-level exams, was to ensure that a doctor trained in Kerala meets the exact same rigorous baseline standard as a doctor trained in Bihar.
In theory, sure.
If you decentralize admissions to 12th grade marks, you introduce massive grade inflation disparities. State boards have wildly different curriculums, different grading standards, and frankly, different levels of academic rigor.
But
Normalizing scores across 30 different boards is a statistical nightmare. You essentially punish students who happen to study under a stricter state board. You trade a transparent crisis, which we can see, which we can investigate via the CBI, and which we can fix technologically, for 1,000 opaque, localized inequalities.
I have to completely challenge the idea that state boards are opaque. State boards are directly accountable to their local electorates and regional governments.
That doesn't make their grading curves comparable.
A failure in Tamil Nadu or Maharashtra can be addressed by the voters of those states. When the NTA fails, the entire nation is paralyzed, and the bureaucracy is insulated from direct local accountability. Furthermore, your concept of a unified standard is a complete myth when the preparation for it is radically unequal.
Wait, how is a standardized test a myth? The questions are identically calibrated for everyone.
Because it only tests who has access to the best resources to crack that specific centralized format. It tests the wealth required to attend elite coaching at institutions like the Dr. Abang Prabhu Medical Academy in Pune or Rinakai chemistry classes in Latur.
Coaching exists for state boards too.
Not like this. These coaching hubs are essentially factory towns built entirely around exam prep. By creating a single point of entry for the entire nation's medical future, the centralized authority inadvertently created the most lucrative black market in the country's educational history.
Right.
But if you distribute the assessment across continuous 12th grade evaluations, you value long-term academic consistency over the wealth required to game a single high-stakes test.
Distributing the risk by returning to state boards also means distributing the accountability, which makes it much harder to track and prosecute bad actors.
I disagree.
A federal investigation by the CBI can map financial transactions and take down a national syndicate. Tracking 100 localized admission scams across fragmented state boards is nearly impossible. This is exactly why the state is bringing its full technological weight to bear on the centralized model.
Which hasn't worked.
When they integrate real-time facial recognition, any mismatch directly triggers an alert to the NTA control room. We must protect the egalitarian ideal of a national standard. It's the only way to ensure every aspiring doctor is measured by the same rigorous metric, regardless of their zip code, their state board's grading curve, or local political influence.
But the full weight of the state was already supposed to be there, and it failed spectacularly. Look at how the state responds when its centralized authority is challenged.
They initiate investigations.
We saw the government suspend communication apps like Telegram under Section 69A of the IT Act simply because leak networks were allegedly using it. They attempted to block the Cockroach Janta Party social media accounts.
To contain the spread of the leak, yes.
When a centralized testing authority fails, the state's immediate response is often censorship and brute force to maintain an illusion of control, rather than addressing the core structural flaw. The fundamental flaw is that as long as humans are involved in setting, translating, or verifying the test, a centralized system will have a single point of failure that can be bought. Decentralization distributes that risk and removes the massive financial incentive that drives these syndicates in the first place.
Well, we have unpacked incredibly complex territory today. What is undeniable is the profound distress this crisis has caused to millions of students.
Absolutely.
The mobilization we've seen, from the youth organizing in the Cockroach Janta Party to the hunger strikes of Sanam Wangchuk, proves that the intersection of educational policy, technological security, and regional autonomy is just one of the most powerful forces in our society today. The challenge is figuring out how to balance the necessity of rigorous national standards with the realities of human fallibility.
Right, and the demands for the Sixth Schedule and LADOC and the demands for educational accountability are fundamentally united by a desire for a system that listens to and protects its most vulnerable stakeholders.
I can agree they stem from similar frustrations.
There is a rich landscape for further exploration within the source material regarding how massive democracies manage this tension between centralized efficiency and regional realities. A digitized vault means nothing if the combination is sold by the person who sets it, and that is a reality centralized systems will always have to confront.
We leave it to you, the listener, to weigh the merits of these arguments. Does the path forward require a heavily fortified, digitized central authority to protect a unified standard? Or does true fairness demand a return to decentralized regional autonomy?
It's the core question we have to answer.
As the technological reforms and the social protests continue to develop, the question remains, do we engineer a stronger system, or do we fundamentally change how we evaluate merit?
Until next time, keep questioning the structures around you.
Thank you for joining us on The Debate.